Hello everyone! Welcome back to this game. When we last left off, Gobli, a goblin, was assigned a range of movement at Common Plane. If the heroes come within this range, Gobli is supposed to attack them so that he can get killed by them and give them money and experience. Don't worry, he's a weakling, so he'll respawn. However, Gobli secretly wishes that he was a boss instead, and understandably so. Meanwhile, Mark, a living hole in the wall, hates being a stationary character, and he wants to go see a retired castle guard because he wants to find out how it's possible that any stationary character can possibly take pride in being stationary. And for whatever reason, he decided to drag Gobli along with him. Hopefully, Gobli won't be missed. On the way to see the retired soldier, I stopped at Common Town to see if Mark could afford a better weapon. He could, but it was only 2 points better than his current weapon, which means only 1 point of extra damage, so I decided it wasn't really worth it and instead bought a few MP healing items. In hindsight, I probably should have bought that weapon. Well, from there, it was off to the soldier's home. In order to reach the home, you have to go through a big field. There's no treasures in the field though, so all you really need to do to reach the home is hold up. Of course, there are some random encounters along the way. Let's see here. We got the plane fairies making a return, and they are joined by kobolds, ferrets, and gnomes. The kobolds aren't anything special, but the ferrets on the other hand introduce a new battle mechanic. So if you've played any RPG ever, you know that running from battles is hard, and the ferrets know this too, so instead of running, they hide. When an enemy is hiding, they are considered temporarily defeated until they just randomly return at some point. And if the battle ends while they're hiding, it actually counts as a victory. You even get the money from them, like they were being all, "No, please don't hurt me! Here, take my money! Ah!" And as for the gnomes, they sometimes defend. And that's basically it. I forgot to mention in the last episode, by the way, that when you defend, you cut physical damage in half, and your characters will sometimes defend while auto-battling. Speaking of auto-battling, you can actually set auto-battle on by default in the configuration menu, and in case you find yourself in a situation where you don't want to be auto-battling, you can just cancel out of it with the cancel button. And while we're in the menu, if you don't like how the menu is green, you can actually change the color if you want. Someone asked about that in the last episode, so now you know. Now then, at the northern end of the field is the soldier's home. And as it turns out, the retired soldier is apparently feeling sorry for himself, because when Mark asks about being a castle guard, the soldier basically tells him off and is all, "Hey, if you want to find out how a castle guard takes pride in his job, go talk to one who isn't retired." So that was a waste of time. And in case you're wondering, no, we do not help this soldier feel better later on. He's nothing but a bitter old man. On the bright side, on my way back to the world map, Gobli learned a cool spell. It's called Bravery, and it raises my entire team's attack by 35 points, meaning an extra 17 points of damage per physical attack. Which would be awesome if it didn't cost more than half his MP, in which case I recommend saving it for a special occasion. Mark also learned something like that. It's called Enfeeble, and it lowers enemies' defense by 20, meaning an extra 10 points of damage when you physically hit them. It only targets one enemy, but Mark has a lot more MP than Gobli does, so it doesn't feel as costly to use. In fact, overall, I found myself using Mark's spells a lot more often than Gobli's. I know I had those MP healing blueberries I just bought, but I didn't really feel like healing Gobli's MP after every single battle. By the way, stat buffs and debuffs are stackable, so keep that in mind for the future. Now our next destination is head to the castle to meet the currently active castle guards. But before going there, Gobli reached level 10, so I decided to go ahead and head back to Weakling Town to upgrade his job class. Unfortunately, it's a little bit of a trek to get there. In order to get to the job exchange, you have to first go through Common Town, then through the forest, then down the tower, into the lower world, and finally into Weakling Town where the job exchange is. Mind you, none of these places are very big, so it doesn't take that long to get there. But still, why couldn't there have been a shortcut to the lower world on the upper world's map? Anyway, at the job exchange, Gobli can now be a king goblin. There's no immediate stat changes with this job upgrade, but it does increase his stat growth, and as a bonus, it has an ability attached to it. The game doesn't tell you what it is unless you go into the editor to check, but as a King Goblin, our team has a higher chance of first strikes, which is actually going to come in handy, cause if the foreboding fog in front of the castle is any indication, the game's difficulty is about to ramp up. With that in mind, I also bought some new armor for Gobli and Mark, and I also got a new club for Gobli and sold his old club. I should not have sold his old club. Well, now that I'm all prepared, let us head on to the castle. Inside castle, we got ghosts, spirits, and mummies. The ghosts are the most dangerous weaklings here. They got a lot of HP, and they frequently use this spell called Smash, which causes around 10 damage. The spirits here also have Smash, but they only have enough MP to cast it once or twice, and they have low health. In fact, they'll try using Smash even if they're out of MP, which, conveniently enough, wastes their turn. This actually provides an interesting choice of strategy here. Do you want to take out the spirits first since they don't have very much health? Or do you want to focus on the ghosts while the spirits use up their MP? Oh, and as for the mummies, they're a little tough, but no big deal. To make things easier for myself, I had Mark use a spell to make a ghost fall asleep, because that's totally a thing that ghosts can do. In theory, a sleeping character won't wake up unless they're physically attacked, but unfortunately, this ain't no eternal slumber, because sleep also randomly wears off on its own. On the bright side, a sleeping character does lose their turn even if they're woken up, so if you're lucky, you can just make them fall right back asleep before they can do anything. But considering sleep's low accuracy and the fact that the spell only targets one enemy, I decided it wasn't really worth using. At least not against random encounters. Might be useful against bosses though. By the way, while I'm thinking about it, you probably noticed how there's this message window that pops up that tells you what's going on in battle. If you don't like that message window, you can actually turn them off in the configuration menu. In fact, battles go a lot faster this way. The reason I bring it up, though, is because this makes it hard to tell what's going on with status effects, like whether the enemy's woken up or whether a spell has actually worked, so I recommend leaving the message window on. Anyway, while the weaklings here in this castle are kind of tough, the biggest pain of this place is the fact that it's a bit of a maze. There's some treasures here and there though, so it is worth going into the dead ends, but the encounter rate here is pretty high, and as a result your resources will quickly get drained. So, before heading to the second floor, I decided it would be probably for the best if I retreat back to town to restock on items. And it was at this point that I finally remembered that, in RPG Maker, you can dual wield. Both hands can equip weapons, both hands can equip shields. Mind you, I don't know why you'd want to dual wield shields, but you can. I wouldn't really recommend it though. The strongest shield that you can get at this point in the game only has a defense of 10, which basically amounts to 5 less damage taken per hit. And while that would certainly add up in a weakling-filled place like the castle, I'd much rather double my offensive output. And besides, if you kill an enemy with one weapon, your attack continues against the next. Dual wielding is awesome. And so, with my newfound strength in hands, it was back to the grind at Castle. By the way, I hope you like that fog scene in front of the castle. It plays every time you enter the place. Pretty sure it's on purpose too. The scene doesn't play when you're leaving the castle. But I digress. Now then, as you'd expect, dual wielding made the castle a lot easier. Gobli even managed to take out ghosts in a single turn. Mind you, you still had to worry about being smashed, but considering how quickly I was taking these guys out, it wasn't really much of a concern. Interestingly, the second floor of the castle has a completely different set of weaklings. We got ourselves some harpies, some lizardmen, and some elves. And curiously, the weaklings on the second floor are easier than the ones on the first. And it wasn't just because I was dual wielding either. I think part of the problem was I was probably a little over leveled at this point. I wound up doing a whole lot of accidental grinding while I was trying to look for treasures at Common Plain and the Soldier's Home. But I think the biggest reason these guys are easier is because they didn't have any damaging spells. Okay, so here's the thing about spell damage in RPG Maker. Those weaklings on the first floor that cause 10 damage with Smash will always cause 10 damage with Smash. This is because RPG Maker does not have a stat that affects spell damage. Well, I mean, there is a magic guard stat, but that's only modified by accessories, and Gobli doesn't have any accessories. This basically means that no matter how much you level grind, the weaklings on the first floor are always going to be able to damage you thanks to Smash. But on the other hand, all the enemies on the second floor, without any damaging spells, they're basically going to get to the point where they don't cause any damage at all. The only spell that any of them cast was a sleep spell, and I was so overpowered at this point that it wasn't really a concern. To make things worse, the second floor also has a couple of treasures, and I wound up gaining even more levels trying to find them. By the way, did you know that you can miss a critical hit? Don't ask me how that works. Though I do like that when you kill an enemy with a critical hit, the force of the impact smears their death animation. So then, that's 2 floors down, 1 floor to go, and on the 3rd floor we actually find that the heroes are here. And they quickly defeat the castle guards that we've been looking for. Of course, as the heroes leave for the upper floors, the castle guards respawn, proud of the battle that just took place. How about we go ahead and learn about that pride now, shall we? Thankfully, the 3rd floor doesn't have any random encounters, so it's a straight shot to the castle guards. Unfortunately, they take their jobs as guards very seriously and attack Gobli and Mark. And so the second boss fight begins. And so the second boss fight ends. Well, that was easy. I think the heroes had a harder time against these guys than I did. The guards didn't even get to use their MP stealing attack against me. To be fair though, it turns out that these guys aren't actually bosses. They are weaklings, just like everyone else we fought in the castle. In fact, the same goes for Slimer and Slimy in the last episode. They're not bosses either, they're weaklings. The only difference here is that the castle guards aren't random encounters, they are stationary characters, and important ones too. The heroes have to go through them in order to get to the boss, which makes them kind of important to the story in a way. And that is why they are proud of their jobs. Later that evening, at Cape Common, Mark thinks about what he had just learned. Unlike the castle guards, he is a stationary character that the heroes ignore, so there really is no comparison, which unfortunately leaves Mark in the same predicament as he was before. If he wants to learn to take pride in being a stationary character, he needs to first learn what it's like to have a range of movement like Gobli does. But before he can consider this further, this white cat shows up. This cat is named Neko. Yes, redundant name is redundant, but don't make fun of Neko's name though, because he is one feisty feline. In fact, Neko wants to become a boss just like Gobli does. Yep, that's right. It took a while, but we're finally getting back to that plot point. And luckily for Gobli, it seems that Neko knows how to accomplish this task. If Gobli wants to become a boss, he needs to go to the boss's castle back in the lower world near Weakling Town. And since he and Gobli share the same goal, Neko joins the party. So, you might be wondering, what is this cat capable of in battle? Well, first off, Neko's apparently just a kitten. That's typical. Like seriously, why do so many RPGs have little kids join your team? More importantly though, Neko is equipped with an iron claw, which is kinda weird when you think about it. If he's a cat, shouldn't he have claws naturally? Maybe Neko was declawed. Ugh, that makes me uncomfortable just thinking about it. More important than that, though, is Neko does not use magic. Instead, he uses special attacks. So, let's go over special attacks real quick. Magic and special attacks are functionally identical, with a couple of key differences. The first is that while magic is learned from gaining levels, special attacks are learned from your job class. When you level up, so does your job class, and when your job class levels up, that might mean learning a new special attack. The game doesn't tell you what your job class level is though, so just keep in mind that the level cap for job classes is 8. And that's only in regards to special attacks. You'll still gain stat bonuses even after 8 levels, so if you want to stick with a job class for the stats, feel free to do so. That said, the biggest difference between magic and special attacks is that while magic uses magic points, special attacks use your health. Now, I know what you're thinking. Using your own health in order to cast magic sounds really sucky. Well, as it turns out, you're right. It is sucky. Now don't get me wrong, special attacks can be worth using if they're strong enough to make up for the damage you're causing to yourself. However, Neko's initial special attack, Cat Trick, is not one of those. It's pretty much just a confusion spell. It only affects one enemy, it has low accuracy, the enemy will randomly hit anyone in battle, not just their teammates, and it wears out if the enemy takes physical damage. I feel like Cat Trick would have been a lot more useful if it affected all enemies and not just one. In fact, the same goes for pretty much any status affliction, whether it's confusion, sleep, or whatever. But when I'm trying to just confuse one enemy in a group of 4 or 5, I feel like I'd be better off just dealing damage instead. And in case you're wondering, this is why I don't have much footage of me using Cat Trick. I only used it the one time and decided, nope, this isn't worth using. That said, Cat Trick might not be very useful, but Neko will eventually learn a special attack worth using. In fact, you remember all those forest leaves I've been saving? I was pretty much saving them all for Neko. He needs all the health that he can get. On a related note, here's an interesting mechanic. The amount of enemies that RPG Maker throws at you in battle is partly determined by how many party members you have. It also depends on enemy size. The battles in the forest are a little more crowded than when Gobli was by himself. Alright, so we're back in the lower world, but before going to the boss's castle, I decided to head back into Weakling Town and bought Gobli his strongest club. And hey, the fact that I can now afford his strongest equipment must mean we're almost at the end of the game. Right? Well, not really. Things get a little unfortunate at the boss's castle. The good news is, it's not another castle dungeon, it's just a cutscene. The bad news is, the head boss basically says that Neko and Gobli can absolutely never become bosses, ever. They were created as weaklings, and that is how they will remain, for the rest of their multiple lives. And with this bombshell dropped on them, our trio is forced to make the walk of shame. That night at Cape Common, our trio rests around a campfire, feeling defeated. Things start looking up though when Slimer shows up and tells of a weakling that actually succeeded in becoming a boss. This sudden glimmer of hope causes Neko to ask, nay, demand that Slimer tell him who this weakling is. Slimer doesn't remember the weakling's name or what he looked like, but he knows that the weakling has retired and now lives as a hermit in the desolate desert. The next morning, with newfound hope in hand, our trio embark to find this mysterious hermit. But not before stopping at Common Town to buy Mark's strongest weapon there, the Memory Dart. And oh boy, I've been looking forward to buying this one the entire game. Let's go ahead and head over to the desert and try it out. Ah, the desert. So, this place has griffins and scorpions, and considering how over-leveled I was, absolutely none of them were a threat. They didn't even have very much HP. I think the scorpions are supposed to be poisonous. Mark has an antidote spell after all, but not once in the entire adventure did I get poisoned. But yeah, let's talk about that Memory Dart, shall we? The Memory Dart has an attack power of 1. And I know that might sound crappy, but guess what? It can hit enemy groups. That's right, RPG Maker lets you create weapons that hit multiple targets. The Memory Dart basically works just like Mark's group spells. It hits identical enemies standing next to each other. So that's pretty cool. On the other hand, this desert is not cool. In fact, it kinda sucks. Basically what we got here is an endless desert. Depending on how you leave each screen, you'll just randomly wind up in one of 4 places. The entrance, an empty map, a map with a rock, and some glowy ruins. The glowy ruins are where you want to wind up, and I found that the easiest way to reach them is to start from the map with the rock. Step to the right side of the rock, and keep going right from there. If you find yourself back at the rock again, keep trying. Eventually the game will decide to bring you to the glowy ruins. And no, there is no easier way. On top of the ruins is a teleporter. Step on that and you'll be warped to another dimension, where giant pumpkins grow on trees. This pumpkin is actually the home of the hermit who once became a boss, and as it turns out, this hermit is a metal slime called the Slime Master. He seems to be your typical wise old slime, as he tells us how every single thing in this world is a character. Not just weaklings and bosses, but even wall holes and tree stumps. Which makes me wonder, do the tree stumps take pride in their jobs? Maybe Mark should be talking to them instead. It is also here that we learn of the weakling's relationship with bosses. It turns out that bosses are quite high and mighty and look down on weaklings. Come to think of it, the Castle Guards were kinda like that. Maybe they weren't real bosses, but their roles made them like bosses, which apparently even included their big heads. As it turns out, this high and mighty behavior is exactly why Neko wants to be a boss. He wants to show them up and treat them like they treated him. And so, Neko politely asks how the Slime Master became a boss. The Slime Master says that if Gobli and Neko want to be bosses, they need to head to Rawr Forest and obtain the boss emblem from evil Lord Garamos. And it is at that point that they will become the last boss. With this information in hand, our trio thank the Slime Master and leave for Rawr Forest. But as they leave, the Slime Master warns them that every character has a role, and the adventure is only complete when all the roles are in place. Ooh, foreshadowing. Okay guys, I have an important question for y'all. Was this video worth the wait? Because this video took me 2 weeks to get done. And while I managed to make some good progress this video, we're still not done with Gobli yet. I mean, Gobli's a short game, so we're definitely going to finish it next time, but some of the longer RPGs will probably take upwards of 10 episodes or more. So I'm really hoping that the amount of progress I make in each video makes up for how long it takes to get each episode ready. On that note, I want to tell you guys some behind-the-scenes info about the work that went into this episode. But first, I want to go ahead and give some shoutouts to some of my patrons. And those shoutouts are going to Snowkieran, Hiruru, and a special thanks to my special sponsor, Lit Dragon. Anyway, I was really hoping that, since all I had to do with this episode was talk about what I played, it would be easier to put together than the research-filled first episode was. It wasn't. I think though that I just need to get used to the workload. I mean, I'm kind of new to making a review show. That said, I'm always open to advice if you guys have any. I mean, last time someone commented on the black bars on the side of the video and suggested that I stretch the screen to fit. Well, the thing of that is, taking a game that isn't widescreen and making it widescreen, I really don't like how that looks. It just makes it all distorted and weird. But at the very least, I decided to fill in those black bars with some sort of background. I'm sure you probably noticed it. I certainly hope you noticed it. I tried to make it noticeable without it being distracting, so let me know what you think of that. Also, the strangest thing happened when I was recording the commentary for this episode. Apparently, I was trying so hard to read the script that my mouth went numb. I couldn't feel some of the words that I was saying. I didn't even know it was possible to talk your mouth numb. And I've been making Let's Plays for 8 years. Speaking of my Let's Plays, you guys should totally check out my Let's Play channel. Right now, I'm doing a playthrough of Pokemon Silver, in which I am going to be a Pokemon instead of the trainer. The next episode of that should hopefully be up tomorrow. And if you like technical RPGs, you might be interested in my playthrough of Shining Force, if you don't mind that I'm not very good at it.